Excellencies and distinguished speakers, I'm Catherine Grace Gardner. On behalf of Cosmos Foundation, I welcome you to today's webinar on Bangladesh-US relations, Prognosis for the Future. I'll now run through the program itinerary for today's event, which will be recorded today and broadcast at a later date on our media partner, United News of Bangladesh, details of which will be shared with all of you. Today we will commence with welcome remarks by Mr. Inayatullah Khan, Chairman of Cosmos Foundation, who will then hand it over to our chair, Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Chowdhury, to deliver his remarks. The keynote address will be delivered today by His Excellency, Mr. Earl Miller, Ambassador of the United States of America to Bangladesh. The keynote address will be delivered also with following by our 4 distinguished discussants who will speak for a duration of 10 minutes. We'll begin with Ambassador Farooq Subhan, former Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh and Distinguished Fellow and Board Member of Bangladesh Enterprise Institute. Major General A.N.M. Muniruzzaman, President, Bangladesh Institute for Peace and Security Studies. Ambassador Tariq Karim, Honorary Advisor Emeritus, Cosmos Foundation. Thank you, and we very much look forward to the discussions today. I will now hand it over to Mr. Inayatullah Khan to commence our session.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me enormous joy to greet all of you at our Ambassadors Lecture Series hosted by the Cosmos Foundation, this one on Bangladesh-US relations, Prognosis for the Future. Ambassador Miller has contributed significantly during his tenure to furthering and expanding relations qualitatively. He has labored relentlessly to widen and deepen the cooperation between Bangladesh and the United States. Ambassador Miller was a U.S. Marine Corps officer, having seen action as a reservist in 1992 Gulf War. With the State Department, with nearly 25 years, he has had diplomatic assignments in Malaysia, Indonesia, Iraq, India, South Africa, and served also as ambassador to Botswana. Today, we have a brilliant panel of speakers and discussants. Ambassador Farooq Subhan, Major General Muniruzzaman, Ambassador Tariq Karim, and I thank them for joining this event. After a difficult start, the relationship between the United States of America and Bangladesh has largely prospered over the better part of the 5 decades now. It has prospered on the basis of strong economic ties and people-to-people links, apart from the shared value of freedom and pluralism that is revered by the people of both countries. Even as relations remain friendly and cordial, the suggestion that it could be better has largely been the tone of the influential essay that appeared recently in the latest edition of Foreign Policy, the journal authored by Anu Anwar and Michael Kugelman, that I'm sure most of you might have read. Anwar and Kugelman did a Bangladesh pitch for the Biden administration, fully aware that writing in the Journal of the Council on Foreign Relations, they would be most widely read within Washington itself, including at the State Department. In fact, given that it is most often felt among observers that what has traditionally held the relationship back is a sort of reluctance on the part of either government to go the extra mile. It is probably also the most obvious place to start. But having had the opportunity to observe the relationship over the last 50 years and seen it web and flow, or even at times stand still, I myself remain convinced that the strongest tool we have in our combined armory are the extensive people-to-people contacts. G2G, or direct government-to-government contact, is of course helpful, but these contacts over the years have always left something to be desired. Whether it is indifference on the part of some administration in Washington or Dhaka's inability to come to terms with the fact that Henry Kissinger is no longer crafting the US foreign policy. Governments, I feel, have always been confined in terms of how far they are willing to go. Focusing on the P2P links also has another significant advantage. It helps to glide over the difficulties that stem from the complex history of 1971 at the level of geopolitics. We understand Nixon's obsession with the backdoor to China that Pakistanis were actively facilitating at that time. But on the strength of the evidence from the last 50 years, some make questions. Was it worth turning a blind eye to the genocide that was perpetrated in erstwhile East Pakistan. But now, if you come down a level or two to look at some people's history, for Kissinger, you have the Lion of the Senate, the late great Ted Kennedy, and the heroic role that he played to highlight the plight of our people going against his own government's policy. You have the blood telegram, one of the most significant documents in the history of US diplomacy, and the story of the man who penned it, Ambassador Archer K. Blood. You have the Concert for Bangladesh with its legendary lineup of American and international stars coming together for something completely novel at the time and selling out at Madison Square Garden, the most famous venue at the time in the world's most famous city. Today, there is a growing Bangladeshi community in the USA, gradually making its mark in the world's most merit-based society, even as it deals with dual identities. Bangladeshi students go from our schools here to some of the best colleges in the world in the US and easily fit in. Some even strut around like campus superstars, as Ambassador Miller has mentioned on numerous occasions. If we keep developing these links and facilitate those with dual nationalities to shift as seamlessly as possible, I believe that in the long term, the bilateral relationship will take care of itself on the basis of strong economic ties in which the diaspora takes part and our shared value of freedom that is so revered by the people of both the countries. On that point, I would like to end with a small quote picked out of the moving speech that late Edward Ted Kennedy delivered on his first visit to independent Bangladesh in February 1972. Every line of that speech resonated with the truth and justice, but the following were the most relevant to our discussion today. Remember, this his own government that has not yet recognized Bangladesh at the time. And he says, it is in the finest tradition of America to embrace the cause of freedom wherever it may be found. You know, while some governments do not yet recognize you, the people of the world do recognize you. And they recognize all you have accomplished here in the name of freedom from tyranny and oppression. We are brothers in liberty, and no man, no policy, no government can change that fact. In a conflict world today, Bangladesh appears to have no enemies. If a Bangladesh-US relationship can be forged that will advance Bangladesh's quest for development and the US aspirations for peace and stability, it can become a model for similar sets of bilateral relations between the US and others. In my view, this can be best achieved through deepening the direct links between Washington and Dhaka and display a strategic dimension of our partnership, one where both see each other as partners in search of peace, stability, and growth. With these words, I shall now pass the microphone to Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Chaudhry, President of our foundation, a scholar, diplomat, and a former foreign affairs advisor during the caretaker government. Over to Dr. Iftikhar Chaudhry.
Laying down parameters of the discussions today, and Ambassador Miller, ladies and gentlemen, it's an enormous pleasure for me, of course, to be able to conduct and chair an event of such importance and significance, which is what we are doing today, which is a review of Bangladesh-US bilateral relations with a view to discussing as to how these could be widened and deepened further to mutual advantage. During the first half of the year in April, we had another such virtual discussion with the South Asian expert Michael Kugelman as the keynote speaker. We broadly noted that Bangladesh's competitive garment industry, education and empowerment of women, network of vibrant NGOs, working in coordination with the public sector and the high level of remittances from its workers abroad have brought it economic dividends and global profits. With regard to the US, Bangladesh is very much in that country's radar as a friend and partner. At the same time, Bangladesh's manifold successes vis-a-vis socioeconomic indices have rendered it, according to the Washington Post, as an economic bull case, a far cry from the basket case cognomen of the early 70s. As Bangladesh graduates out of the list of LDCs, American support in obtaining market access will be critical in helping it grow and progress economically. Bangladesh also must be able to learn to handle the complexities of dealing with America. The US is a unique system, globally one of its kind. Many elements within that system both coordinate and compete with one another to contribute to policy making. Experts such as Kissinger and Graham Ellison have a term for it: bureaucratic politics. Now, it doesn't mean politics among bureaucrats as we understand it. It is about pulls and pushes between agencies, organizations, interest groups for influence. The challenge for Bangladeshi diplomacy is to be able to identify appropriate elements for desired outcome and engage them. I do not wish to delve too deeply into the substance of what should really be left to the stellar group of speakers that we have on the list today. So without any further ado, I should invite Ambassador Miller to the microphone. Ambassador, you have the floor.
You may have heard me say before that I'll normally keep my remarks very short, but I'm going to go into a little more detail this morning because there's a number of issues to cover as I come to the end of my 3-year assignment in Bangladesh. And I had mentioned that I normally keep my remarks short because no one even asked Lincoln or Churchill for a longer speech, and I'm neither one of those. I see a lot of familiar faces who have been great sources of counsel and wisdom over the past 3 years for me, and I thank you very much. You know, it's been one of the great honors and joys of my life to serve as the United States ambassador to Bangladesh. You probably heard me say before, there's nowhere I would rather serve as a U.S. ambassador than in this remarkable country. I'm so fortunate to have led such a wonderful embassy team in one of the world's great development success stories. You know, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about my 3-year assignment in Bangladesh is the country's famous hospitality. You know, everywhere I travel, I'm met with the greatest, warmest courtesy that seems to me uniquely Bangladeshi. And I'll certainly miss the many kindnesses that I've experienced over the past 3 years. And of course, nowhere I visit in Bangladesh there isn't someone who has a close association with the United States, be it a relative in Queens or Detroit or Houston or someone that's attended a U.S. university. That's the enduring strength of the U.S.-Bangladesh relationship. I told the Honorable Prime Minister when I met her for the first time it was November of 2018, that during my first 8 months in country, I would visit all 8 divisions in Bangladesh. And I had the great pleasure to do so. And as you heard what Senator Ted Kennedy said, I've certainly found to be true, that the true foreign policy of America is citizen to citizen, friend to friend, people to people. Both of our great countries were founded on democratic principles after difficult struggles for independence. Bangladeshis and Americans share that defining experience. In my travels across your country, I feel a nation on the move. I sense the energy and urgency of a nation preparing to play a larger role on the regional and global stage. You know, I'm told that the red circle on the Bangladeshi flag represents the sun rising over Bengal. I think that's very apt. The nation is on the rise. And my job as U.S. ambassador is to encourage and support that rise in partnership for the betterment of the people of America and Bangladesh. I'm proud of the United States has been part of the story of Bangladesh for the past 5 decades. Since Bangladesh's independence, the U.S. government has contributed over $8 billion in development assistance. We continue to contribute more than $200 million a year as one of Bangladesh's largest development partners. And our partnership has never been stronger. Together, we've battled the COVID-19 pandemic, and America supported Bangladesh, and Bangladesh supported America from the very, very beginning. The United States has donated nearly 17 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine free of charge, and provided another $121 million to help protect the health and save the lives of Bangladeshis across the country. And that's just part of a broader commitment by the United States to lead the global COVID-19 response by providing 1 billion doses of Pfizer vaccine around the world free of charge through 2022. I don't need to tell you what astounding economic and development progress this nation has made over the past 50 years. Emerging as it did, like the United States, from a liberation war, bruised and bloodied but victorious, poor in everything but hope, courage, and perseverance, and now on track to graduate from least developed country status by 2026. A full decade of over 6% GDP growth, projected to be the 28th largest economy in the world by 2030, an 80% drop in infant mortality, achieving universal primary education, really an amazing journey. Of course, Bangladesh, like every nation, faces challenges, but this country has an enduring, powerful partner in the United States that wants to help address those challenges. We'll continue to work with our Bangladeshi friends in government, civil society, the business community, the press, to further strengthen the ties, understanding between our two great nations. You know, for over 3 years, my leitmotif has been, nothing is impossible in the U.S.-Bangladesh relationship. As pilots say about a clear, open sky, visibility and ceiling unlimited. I'm asked often, what are my top priorities to further deepen the bilateral ties between our nations? And I was telling someone yesterday, as we say in my hometown of Flint, Michigan, we need to keep on keeping on. We need to continue the momentum of our strong partnership. I can boil down our top 5 priorities to what I used to call the big 5 when I was the ambassador in Botswana, but we have a big 5 here as well. My embassy team and I want to work with the government and people of Bangladesh on Indo-Pacific and global security. We want to work together on trade, investment, and commerce for sustainable and broadly shared economic prosperity that opens new markets for American businesses. We will promote democracy, good governance, and respect for human rights. I want us to help Bangladesh become a healthier, better educated, more food secure and climate resilient middle income company that partners with the United States. And we will help Bangladesh address the Rohingya refugee crisis. The United States wants Bangladesh to succeed. We are your biggest economic fan. The United States buys more Bangladeshi exports than any other country. In 2020 alone, we had more than $7.9 billion in two-way goods trade. That's double what it was 10 years ago. COVID hit our trade, of course, in 2020, as it did everywhere, but our bilateral trade is growing again. In the first 9 months of this year, it was up 33% over the same period last year. U.S. companies are among the largest investors in Bangladesh. Chevron is the nation's single largest foreign investor and produces more than 50% of Bangladesh's natural gas. It's also important to remember that weak institutions and corruption and poor human rights conditions drive away private sector investment. American businesses are hungry to invest in countries that operate transparently, uphold the rule of law, and protect intellectual property rights. And there's no trade-off, as you've heard me say since I arrived 3 years ago, between democracy and economic development. They are mutually reinforcing objectives. The United States also supports Bangladesh's efforts to be a bridge for commerce and an anchor for stability and prosperity in the region. Bangladesh is strategically located at the crossroads of South and Southeast Asia and plays an important role in our Indo-Pacific vision. We share the goal of building a more prosperous, secure, interconnected Indo-Pacific region. And I'm often asked about the Indo-Pacific strategy and what that vision is all about. And it's simply, as you've heard me say before, a whole of government effort to support a free and open Indo-Pacific region, an area representing half the world's population and half of global GDP, where sovereign, independent nations can prosper in freedom and peace. The vision focuses on 3 areas: economic, security, and governance. The The United States is an Indo-Pacific nation itself and deeply invested in the broader region. The United States conducted more than $1.8 trillion in bilateral trade with the Indo-Pacific in 2020 alone. So we work with key partners like Bangladesh to protect and ensure a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific that respects principles such as peaceful resolution of disputes, freedom of navigation, open and transparent investment environments, and strong and responsible governing institutions. And these principles create the conditions that have allowed for such tremendous growth and prosperity in the region over the past 7 decades, and they'll be critical for the region's future as well. One of the great joys of being the U.S. ambassador in Bangladesh is I get to spend so much time with young Bangladeshis. And you're absolutely right. When Bangladeshis go to American campuses and universities, they're superstars, academically, socially. You have 3 Bangladeshi students at a community college in the U.S., they form some kind of organization. And before long, they're running student politics and doing all kinds of wonderful things. I've seen that myself. It's one of the real strengths of Bangladeshi youth as they travel to the United States for higher education. I spent a lot of time in schools and madrasas and universities and with young men and women starting out in the business world, in government, public service, or working to improve their communities in civil society organizations. And I was able to reach many more through social media. For example, through our great Bangladeshi and American public affairs team, our embassy Facebook page has more than 7.4 million followers, making it the most popular U.S. embassy Facebook page in the world. The United States and our embassy had very popular education and cultural exchange programs with Bangladesh. The father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, was on an American exchange program in 1958, and I just received some wonderful photographs of his visit to the United States in 1958, the year I was born. Looking very slim and handsome and dapper, that we're going to share with the Honorable Prime Minister. One of our best known exchange programs is the International Visitor Leadership Program, the IVLP, where young professionals can explore their fields of interest in the U.S. I'm especially fond of the Kennedy Lugar Youth Exchange and Study Program, known as YES. This program provides scholarships for secondary students to live with an American family while attending an American high school for 1 academic year. It was co-founded by that great friend of Bangladesh, Senator Ted Kennedy. 450 young Bangladeshis have benefited from YES scholarships since 2003. And of course, in the academic world, the prestigious U.S. Fulbright program, the first U.S. government exchange program, has given Bangladeshi scholars and students the opportunity to pursue study and research at U.S. universities, and for Americans to do the same here in Bangladesh. So I'm always excited to promote American higher education and encourage Bangladeshi students to encourage studying in America. Yeah, our universities are among the best in the world. They consider the source, but I think that's demonstrably true. You know, last year, over 9,000 Bangladeshi students went to the United States for education. The number of Bangladeshi students enrolled in U.S. universities has almost tripled in the last decade. When I arrived in 2018, Bangladesh was among the top 25 countries sending students to the United States. It's now in the top 15, despite COVID, and that's quite an accomplishment. We have a wonderful alumni program that we keep in contact with. Over 4,000 alumni from the country are on one of the best ways to strengthen ties between our 2 countries. We have, of course, the American Center at our embassy in Dhaka and the Edward M. Kennedy Center for Public Service and Arts, or EMK Center in Dhamundi. Both focus on fund educational and cultural programs for young people. And we have American Corners in Chattagram, Khulna, Sylhet, and Rajshahi, and they're wonderful resources for young people looking to study in the United States. There's a number of other programs that we run here, of course. I won't go into great detail. The English Access Micro Scholarship Program has educated 1,300 students in English and leadership skills, and so many more. You know, I spent much of the past 3 years advocating for increased trade and investment between our 2 countries. As I've said, the United States is heavily invested, literally, in the economic success of Bangladesh. The United States is a big supplier of cotton used by the Bangladeshi ready-made garment sector. A U.S. company is starting production of dyes for the RMG industry in the Bangladesh economic zone, and American companies invest in plenty of other sectors. Products in the United States include locomotives, commercial aircraft, and I've had the wonderful experience a number of times to go with the Honorable Prime Minister to inaugurate new Boeing aircraft. All of these things, power generation equipment, river dredges, all of which make Bangladeshi industry more competitive globally. In addition, U.S. businesses fund dynamic Bangladeshi startup tech companies, financial services powering online shopping, and social media connecting Bangladesh to the world. In 2020, agricultural trade between our two countries reached $1.6 billion, with U.S. exports doubling since 2016, and we're seeing more and more diversification in the ag field. The U.S., as I said, is the largest investor in Bangladesh. U.S. companies are bringing some of the best and most innovative technologies to this country. U.S. companies contribute significantly to the economic development of Bangladesh and train thousands of Bangladeshi workers to the highest international standards. The new country director for Coca-Cola, who I met last week, told me how a company initiative has developed 70 business centers where 110,000 women have received business skills training. And you know, you've heard me say this before, and I said it again at the 25th anniversary of the American Chamber of Commerce. I'm constantly encouraging American companies, trade delegations, trade missions, to CEOs to come and see Bangladesh for themselves. If you can visit New Delhi or Singapore or Dubai, you can also visit Dhaka and appreciate for yourself the potential of a market of more than 165 million consumers. I tell U.S. companies they can play a leading role in helping Bangladesh address challenges that constrain economic growth by bringing the highest quality education to this nation's children, improving and expanding roads, railroads, and ports, increasing the supply and distribution of electrical power and natural gas, and investing American know-how, technology, and resources in expanding the economic base of this dynamic young country. American businesses want to invest in countries that operate transparently, uphold the rule of law, and protect individual rights. And they are watching developments in Bangladesh. Progress in these areas will protect the country's long-term growth and stability. There's a growing list of very successful U.S. investments in Bangladesh. As I said before, Chevron is the largest producer of natural gas, accounting for over half of market production. GE has installed 38 highly engineered turbines in power plants across Bangladesh to turn natural gas into electricity. Progress Rail, a division of the well-known U.S. company Caterpillar, is delivering heavy-duty locomotives to Bangladesh railways. We have Accelerate Energy, which has supplied 2 floating storage and regasification units in the Bay of Bengal. A liquefied natural gas terminal is crucial to meeting Bangladesh's energy needs. And one of the things I wasn't able to do during my 3 years here, but I'm hoping that Peter Haas, once he's confirmed as a new U.S. ambassador to Bangladesh, will be able to do is have a commercial attaché come here to the embassy. I had a commercial attaché when I was the consul general in Johannesburg, and that will it will really help our economic team here and continue to turbocharge our relationship in our commercial engagement. I get asked a lot about GSP. The suspension of the General System of Preferences program in 2013 signaled the United States' strong interest in Bangladesh meeting international labor standards, especially in worker rights. U.S. imports for Bangladesh under GSP were modest, only 34.7 million, or less than 1% of Bangladesh's $5 billion in exports to the United States in 2012, the year before the program's suspension. The GSP program does not include apparel or other ready-made garments from any country, and GSP has not been reauthorized by Congress for any country since its expiration last December. While significant progress has been made in improving the safety of garment factories in recent years, several key issues, especially on labor rights, remain unaddressed. The U.S. government takes these seriously. We fund efforts to improve labor rights as well as occupational safety and health in the RMG sector with international partners, civil society, businesses, and the government of Bangladesh. On security cooperation, the United States and Bangladesh have shared common interests that make us natural security partners. We want to build a flexible, resilient network of security partners to promote regional stability, advance maritime security and freedom of navigation, and address shared challenges throughout the region. To that end, we're expanding security cooperation with allies and partners like Bangladesh, mostly focused on maritime security, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, peacekeeping operations, and countering transnational crime. Our military cooperation has never been stronger. You know, tomorrow morning, I'm flying to Chattogram, where Bangladeshi and U.S. navies are conducting exercises in the Bay of Bengal. And for the first time since 2015, a U.S. Navy ship, the USS Tulsa, will dock for a port call in Chittagong. Our U.S. Navy SEALs and Bangladeshi's squads finished joint training earlier this month. Our anti-terrorism training and coordination with Bangladeshi police is longstanding, with appreciable results of quicker, professional responses to terrorist threats. Note the incident last week at the airport with the alarm of a bomb on a Malaysian air flight. U.S. trained first responders showed their mettle with an exemplary response. We look to deepen that partnership. The U.S. provided Bangladesh with $40 million to enhance coastal radar systems, patrol boat fleets, and training in maritime interdiction as part of our Bay of Bengal initiative that will allow maritime nations in South Asia to share shipping information to improve detection and response to emerging threats. And of course, we also work closely on counterterrorism efforts and programs that offer alternatives to violent radicalization. And all of our counterterrorism and security programs emphasize the need to respect and protect human rights. And I'm so proud to serve in a country that is such a strong supporter of international peacekeeping missions. Bangladesh is the top troop contributing country with almost 7,000 peacekeepers serving around the world. The United States provides more than $23 million in support to Bangladesh peacekeepers through the Global Peace Operations Initiative for training, equipment, and facilities construction. In 2022 to 23, we plan to increase that support to $30 million for unmanned aerial vehicles granted to Bangladesh to support peacekeeping operations. This is probably the most important thing I will say this morning. President Biden has placed human rights at the center of U.S. foreign policy. He made clear U.S. diplomacy will champion freedom, equality, opportunity, and the belief in the universal rights of all people. The United States will affirm and uphold the human dignity and human rights which bind nations in common cause. The United States and Bangladesh have much in common, starting with, as I said, with our heroic struggles for independence and commitment to our founding principles. Every vibrant democracy must work constantly to live up to its founding ideals and commitment to human rights and social justice for all citizens. And I believe every country, including my own, story is the struggle, ongoing and imperfect, to live up to our founding ideals and principles. You know, we talk a lot about economic development. Economic development needs to go forward with democratic development. Economic growth and respect for democracy and human rights are mutually reinforcing. Bangladesh's future success will also be fueled by a strengthening of its democratic institutions and governing structures. I deeply admire Bangladesh as one of the world's great development success stories, and am proud of the friendship between our two nations. As a friend, I raise issues of concern over human rights at the highest levels. It's an important part of my job to promote accountability and the strengthening of human rights and democracy in Bangladesh. And those conversations are always honest, direct, and respectful. A lot of listening on my part. Our most recent human rights report highlighted U.S. concerns over restrictions on fundamental freedoms, including freedom of expression and assembly, on the activities of non-governmental organizations, reports of security force abuses, including extrajudicial killings, torture, and abuse while in custody, enforced disappearances, and arbitrary detentions, and restrictions on freedom of association and a lack of worker rights protections. Freedom of the press and expression is vital for any healthy democracy. Media, civil society, members of opposition groups, and peaceful protesters must be able to express their views and advocate for change without fear of retribution. Voices of dissent and disagreement need to be heard and respected, and I believe that the strongest democracies flourish from frequent and lively debate. It speaks to the strength and maturity of our relationship, I think, between the United States and Bangladesh. We can have these candid conversations and disagreements over these concerns while maintaining our close partnership. And we continue to work closely with the government of Bangladesh and civil society on programs to address these issues. As I mentioned, all U.S. training with Bangladesh security forces include classes on human rights. I get asked about the Digital Security Act. While the United States recognizes the need to protect digital security, we share the strong concern of the international community. The Digital Security Act can be used to suppress and criminalize free speech. We are concerned self-censorship is already widespread. It's important not to confuse digital security with cybersecurity. A focus on control of digital media can distract from much-needed efforts to protect against malicious cybersecurity threats. We are concerned about ongoing arrests and arbitrary detention of journalists and civil society activists under the DSA, and we encourage the government of Bangladesh to revise the law to bring it into conformity with Bangladesh's international commitments on human, civil, and political rights, and to ensure it provides for checks and balances against arbitrary arrest and other undue restrictions on the right to legitimate exercises of freedom of expression. The United States values freedom of expression, including online expression, as a key component of democratic governance, and I really appreciate the dialogue we've been able to have with the government of Bangladesh on how to improve legislation to ensure Bangladesh's security is addressed, but not at the cost of its own democratic principles. You know, I arrived in November of 2018, a little over a month before the national elections. And I recall well former President Trump's call for the government to renew its commitment to protecting human rights, individual freedom of expression, and democratic institutions. And you may recall that the United States and I were calling on the government to commit to a free, fair, credible, and participatory national election that reflected the will of the Bangladeshi people. As noted in our most recent human rights report, the December 2018 election, in our view, was not free and fair, given widespread and credible reports of irregularities, including ballot box stuffing and intimidation of opposition polling agents and voters. The United States was not alone in expressing such concerns, nor are the concerns raised unique to Bangladesh at all. Democratic values and democratic governance is under pressure across the globe, including in my nation. We must remember and affirm democracy, government of the people, by the people, and for the people, is humanity's most enduring means in advancing peace, prosperity, and security. Democracy can only function when all people are fully included, their rights protected, their voices heard, and their votes counted. This is why we defend democratic values at home and around the world. So the United States supports free, fair, credible, participatory, and peaceful elections that reflect the will of the Bangladeshi people. We support a plural and democratic electoral process with protections for voters and participants set out so admirably in Bangladesh's constitution. And again, in every country, it's important all political parties and voices, all voters can participate and have confidence in the electoral process and that their voices count and matter. President Biden has made protecting and advancing democratic institutions and processes a top U.S. foreign policy priority, along with his commitment to human rights and freedom of expression and dissent. I'm not going to go, I had some thoughts I wrote up last night on the Indo-Pacific strategy. I talked a little bit about that. I would like to say, you've heard me say it before, our engagement in the Indo-Pacific is not against any one country. It's not designed to make anyone choose between countries. Instead, our engagement is about advancing an optimistic vision that we have for our participation and partnership in the region. We seek to grow the U.S.-Bangladesh partnership because we believe it is in the best interest of both our people. We share the goal of building a more prosperous, secure, and interconnected Indo-Pacific region. We're not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocs. The United States is ready to work with any nation that steps up and pursues peaceful resolution to shared challenges if we have intense disagreements in other areas. And we welcome the opportunity to work with our regional partners to create a prosperous path towards a shared future based on freedom, good governance, respect for international law, and transparency. And of course, Bangladesh is a sovereign, independent nation that decides for itself what organizations or partnerships it chooses to join. You know, the last 3 years, I spent a lot of time working on the Rohingya refugee crisis. I visited the refugee camps in Cox's Bazar 14 times, and I'm going, and when you think that for a year and a half, I couldn't travel because of COVID. So basically in a year and a half, I was down there 14 times, and I intend to go again to just kind of as a gratitude tour to express my appreciation for the wonderful work being done there by those who are providing humanitarian assistance to this persecuted community. You know, Bangladesh is a model to the world. What other country in the world would open its hearts and borders to this number of refugees, close to 900,000? The United States is deeply appreciative of the generosity of the Bangladesh government and people. We continue to call on the government of Burma to create conditions for the safe, voluntary, and dignified return of all refugees based on their informed consent. Through high-level engagement, we continue to urge all actors in Burma to play a constructive role in resolving the crisis, restoring rule of law, immediately granting unhindered humanitarian and media access, guaranteeing those who voluntarily choose to return to their places of origin are able to do so in safety and dignity, and addressing the root causes of conflict in Rakhine State. We also call for accountability for those responsible for crimes against this vulnerable population. That hasn't been made easier by recent developments in Burma, but we continue to advocate and welcome any kind of cooperation between Burma, Bangladesh, other countries on establishing some kind of framework for the voluntary repatriation of the hundreds of thousands of refugees who are forced to flee their homes. One of my great regrets as U.S. ambassador is not a single Rohingya refugee has had a chance to return home over the past 3 years, indeed, since the start of this great crisis. The United States is a leading contributor of humanitarian assistance in response to the Rohingya refugee crisis by far. In 2021, the United States contributed $300 million in humanitarian assistance. The United States has provided over $1.5 billion since the outbreak of violence in August 2017, and approximately of that amount, $535 million is dedicated to programs in Bangladesh for Rohingya refugees and Bangladeshi host communities. We welcome Bangladesh's continued commitment to a voluntary, safe, and dignified return that puts the UN High Commissioner for Refugees at the center of the repatriation process, as specified in their memorandum of understanding signed in 2018. And I'm just about to conclude. I feel I do need to say this. You know, I will more than likely retire from the Foreign Service in January of next year after 35 wonderful years. There is nothing that gives me more pride as a U.S. public servant than the opportunity to work on the Rohingya refugee crisis. The heroic men and women from Bangladesh's local NGOs, from the international community who are working with the Rohingya refugees, their work is absolutely heroic and deserves our gratitude and admiration. And I leave with enormous respect for that effort. And I can assure you that when Peter arrives here, he will continue to focus on this issue, that the United States will not turn the page, will not lose focus on this crisis, and we will continue to support Bangladesh in trying to resolve it as soon as possible. So finally, I was thinking also last night, how do I feel about my time in Bangladesh? You know, before I came to Bangladesh, I was also considering retiring, and I asked myself if I was ready for this new challenge and adventure. And I was, and I think we all are deep inside. I took inspiration from Tagore's poem, Closed Path, where the Bard of Bengal wrote, "I thought that my voyage had come to its end, at the last limit of my power, that the path before me was closed, that provisions were exhausted, and the time had come to take shelter in the silent obscurity. But I find that thy will knows no end in me, And when old words die out on the tongue, new melodies break forth from the heart. And where the old tracks are lost, new country is revealed with its wonders. I have tried to lead our diplomatic mission here with principle, optimism, and humility. I think even my beloved, big, bold, brassy US of A leads best when it leads modestly. Humility, but also confidence that comes with knowing, as history has proven, America at its best has a greater ability than any other country to mobilize ourselves and others for the greater good. The world needs America's leadership. We will work with our Bangladeshi friends and partners to address human rights concerns, to defeat COVID, to take on the challenge of climate change, to create a more just, healthier, safe, more prosperous world for our children. And I hope I've contributed to that effort in some small way. I think anyone with a little integrity, with a bit of moral courage, and perhaps average intellectual honesty can make a great difference for that greater good. It's been a great honor to try to do that as such a privileged guest in Bangladesh. At this point in your country's history, 50 years young, a nation of hope and promise and resilience, striding boldly into a bright future. And in closing, I turn to the wisdom of the great philosopher Piglet of the Winnie the Pooh stories. Piglet noticed that even though he had a very small heart, it could hold a rather large amount of gratitude. So to all my friends on screen, to the people of Bangladesh, from the bottom of this grateful heart, Anak Donabad, thank you. Abardeka Hobe.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for that very comprehensive expose of Bangladesh-US relations. At the same time, of course, I would like to thank you for your own contribution towards its development during your tenure of the past 3 years. And I'm very pleased to hear that, that the affection that you hold this country and its people in your heart will sustain and continue even after your retirement from 35 years of, as I can see, an excellent public service, a person of your qualities. No, every end is a beginning, and I think that is the essence of what Tagore, I think, that you just quoted. So those of us who have retired from public service welcome you to this world of retired personnel, diplomatic personnel, and yet you can see that all of us have returned to the screen again to continue doing the same things in another form. So I shall now proceed in the following manner. We have, as I said, a stellar of discussants. I shall give them floor one by one for 10 minutes each. You can sort of formulate a question if you wish for the ambassador, because eventually I shall give the ambassador another round of smaller duration, of course, to respond in essence or point by point to some points of matters you raised. The members of the panel of discussants are as follows: Ambassador Farooq Subhan, Major General retired Munir Zaman, Professor Haider Ali Khan, Ambassador Tariq Karim. So I will now cut to the chase and begin by giving the floor to Ambassador Farooq Subhan, who needs no introduction beyond his name.
Thank you, Chair. If the Ambassador Miller, fellow panelists, viewers, Assalamu alaikum, good morning to all of you. Let me at the outset congratulate Ambassador Miller on his very forthright and comprehensive presentation. I think he's pretty much covered all aspects of the bilateral relationship. I'd like to focus on a few points. I've had the privilege of being there at the birth of US-Bangladesh relations. As I think I've mentioned to Ambassador Miller and his predecessors, I was the very first director in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs back in early 72, responsible for Asia and the Pacific, North and South America. And since then, I've had the pleasure and privilege of working and being friends with virtually every U.S. ambassador that has served in Bangladesh during the last 50 years. And I continue, as Ambassador Miller well knows, to remain in close touch with many, if not all of them who are still alive. More recently, I've spent 6 months in Washington. I got back a month ago. During my 6 months there, I did, notwithstanding COVID, have a number of meetings at the State Department with a variety of think tanks and various other people who take an interest in Bangladesh. I was also invited to join the Investment Roadshow, which took place late July to early August, where we traveled from New York to Washington to Los Angeles and then to Silicon Valley, and held a number of investment seminars showcasing the investment opportunities in Bangladesh. Recurring conversation in Washington with a variety of people, as I mentioned, took basically the following, if you like, shape. One is the huge sense of both appreciation, in some cases amazement. I remember the speech given by Larry Summers, the former Secretary of the Treasury, to the investment seminar in New York, when he said he had no idea about the amazing achievements that Bangladesh has made, and that 10 years ago we were maybe a $50 billion economy, and that today we are a $350 billion economy. So his first bit of advice was, you need to get this message across to the people that matter in the US. And as many of you know, the US and Washington in particular functions in its own way. You have Congress, you have the administration, and the administration has many parts. You have the White House, the National Security Council, the State Department. You have the think tanks, you have the media, the important role played by the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, among other publications, not to mention television, and of course, the fact that today there are some, I would say, unprecedented divisions within the country, within the media, within the political establishment, within, indeed, the business community. So you have this very, I would say, gung-ho story about Bangladesh and its remarkable achievements. And indeed, in partnership with CSIS, we organized an event on 50 years of Bangladesh's remarkable journey, where we highlighted the many achievements of Bangladesh. At the same time, as Ambassador Miller has very candidly articulated, there are issues of concern in Washington relating to labor standards and human rights and the democratic process in Bangladesh. So one issue with which we are, as it were, currently grappling with, and which obviously has caused some measure of concern in Dhaka is why have we not been invited to the Democracy Summit, which in fact takes place tomorrow and day after, hosted by President Biden. So perhaps some people see this as a way of conveying a message that maybe we need to make some improvements in Bangladesh. Is this a carrot or is this a stick? We have been told, within quotes, from reliable sources, that Bangladesh will be invited to the next Democracy Summit, which hopefully will be an in-person summit. One of the issues which featured prominently in my many conversations was given this new Bangladesh with its remarkable achievements, how do we take this relationship to the next level? We have, if I kind of look back over the last 50 years, you know, there have been different issues which have, in a sense, dominated the relationship. In the early years, there was the issue of humanitarian assistance, the PL-480 program, which featured prominently. And then we had, from the 80s onwards, the importance of our trade relations with the US. The US emerged as our major market for ready-made garments, and indeed it was the opportunity provided by the quota system and the fact that Bangladesh enjoyed generous quotas that provided such a major incentive for the growth of the RMG sector in Bangladesh. So we do need to remember that in our relations. And I do remember, in fact, my meetings with Mr. Arnold Hammer and in China, where I was able to persuade him to take an interest in looking for gas in Bangladesh. And then one thing led to another, and today we have Chevron there, and energy cooperation has figured prominently in the bilateral cooperation. And of course, during the last, I would say, decade and a half, security and counterterrorism and counter-radicalization has also featured very prominently in the relationship. So the big issue is, and where do we go from here? How do we take this relationship to the next level? What does it take for there to be a summit-level meeting between President Biden and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina? Because my recollection is that it's been 20 years since we had a summit-level meeting between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister. Do we not? What do we need to do to qualify for this? The other, if you like, I would say very compelling message that I bring back from Washington is Washington's deep concern and preoccupation currently with its relations with China, which in a sense feeds into the Quad, the Indo-Pacific strategy, and more recently AUKUS. And where does a country like Bangladesh fit into this? We, as is well known to everyone, follow this policy of being friends with everyone. We have a good relationship with with the players on both sides of this emerging divide. And this will certainly prove to be a challenge for our diplomacy, as indeed our ability to leverage our strengths in Washington. One of, in my view, major strengths in Washington, indeed the key to the transformation in India's relations with the United States, has been the important role of the diaspora. The Indian diaspora played a key role in making that happen. And I believe the Bangladesh diaspora has that ability. We have today a second and third generation diaspora. I've had the pleasure and privilege of interacting with many of them all over the United States. They are doing exceptionally well in different fields. We have Bangladeshis, academics right across the United States in prominent positions at Harvard and the top universities. We are major players in the US Engineers Association, Architects Association, Physicists Association, name it, and Bangladeshis are there and actively involved. So how do we leverage more effectively the diaspora? And I think that public diplomacy has a major role to play in the case of Bangladesh, because we need to remember that there are 185 embassies, each one trying to make its mark and presence felt in Washington. So there is a lot of competition entailed in making, as you like, an impression, getting ourselves onto the radar screen at the top. And that's not going to be easy. And we cannot, although we may wish to, also ignore some of the issues which were raised by Ambassador Miller relating to human rights and the Digital Security Act and labor standards, because this is a part of the current administration's interests. So how do we handle these complexities in the relationship? I think that's going to be a major challenge. But I see enormous opportunities in the relationship. I recall there was this extremely successful dialogue that took place, the Economic Partnership Dialogue, which in a sense is one of probably 12 different sets of dialogues that are currently taking place between Bangladesh and the US. So it's now a very diverse relationship, and as we focus on trying to bring in, instead of the $3, $4, or maybe even $5 billion a year in FDI and take it to 10, 15, and $20 billion, clearly the United States has a leading role to play, because the US still remains, and I believe will continue to be a major economic and investment partner of Bangladesh in the years ahead. So these are some of the challenges, but I see enormous opportunities in this relationship. And I believe this does pose an important challenge for Bangladesh's diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Farooq Bhai. That was very good, I thought. I mean, you also took up some of the issues that Ambassador Miller had raised, and I'm absolutely certain that interactions and discussions will proceed on these subjects as well across a very broad spectrum. You also have debriefed us on your 6 months in Washington. Very glad to hear that these have given some impetus to our bilateral relations.
Absolutely right. The Summit for Democracy is a two-part process. The first is a virtual discussion, while the second will be an in-person meeting at about this time next year. To be invited, participants will need to show a commitment to the summit's areas of focus: strengthening democracy, defending against authoritarianism, addressing and fighting corruption, and promoting respect for human rights. Not all democracies were able to attend the summit, but all who value democracy can support the tenets of the summit and strive for progress in advancing democratic principles. Peter and I were talking about this. Peter Haas, again, not confirmed yet, but hopefully he will be soon as a new ambassador. We're discussing this, and I obviously hope we have continued engagement on this topic with government officials in the coming weeks. But in the long run, the U.S. is seeking to engage any and all countries that show a genuine willingness in making commitments that support the summit's goals. Let me, I guess, in closing, with my final comments, I apologize. I have to head off to a television thing. Well, I meant what I said, and I don't leave until January, so I'm not. It's not like I'm leaving next week, but in some ways, what's that little on your rearview mirror in your car? It says objects are closer than they appear. It's coming up fast, and as I will soon be telling my staff in a town hall meeting, this has been, again, one of the great honors and privileges in my life. I've served at many different countries around the world over the last 35 years, but there's something uniquely warm the way that this incredible country receives all guests, but certainly privileged guests like myself. Every U.S. ambassador who has served here before I came, and they all came to my swearing in, they told me, you are going to love Bangladesh. And they described all the reasons that we talked about a bit today. They all continue to be engaged in Bangladesh. They're deeply interested. They want Bangladesh to succeed. They have so many friends as I do. Just a personal aside to give you an example of how personally invested I am in this extraordinary country. My oldest son, Andrew, joined me in January after he graduated from college. He went to work for the World Food Program. After about 2 months, he said, you know what, Dad, I want to move out, get my own apartment. I'm going to adopt a Bangladeshi street dog that lived in front of our house. And that's just what he did. And Andrew is going to stay here for 2 more years. He's going to learn Bangla. He has more Bangladeshi friends than I do. He loves the country as I do. But it's just an example of he was warmly welcomed. He felt at home, and he wants to be part of this country because, as I said, it's a country on the move, a country of great resilience, promise, opportunity. And our innumerable people-to-people ties will hold us in good stead through any kind of bilateral irritants or ups and downs. And let me just say again, I thank you from the bottom of this grateful heart for your friendship and counsel and wisdom. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your time and your participation. So, General Munir Zaman, you take the floor now, and let's see how long the Ambassador can stay. But in any case, we will have a recorded version of our discussions. General Munir.
Thank you, Chair. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I will be touching on bilateral relationships between Bangladesh and the United States, primarily focusing on the strategic and security issues. Heading a security think tank in Bangladesh, this is a core area of our focus, and we have been, with deep satisfaction, studying the growing relationship between our two countries. Bangladesh has been a key participant in most of U.S. government's international initiatives, be it development, be it food security, healthcare, or environmental initiatives. But a major milestone was achieved when in 2012, an agreement was signed for a bilateral strategic dialogue process between our two countries. and that dialogue has now expanded and includes all key strategic and security issues. For example, in June 2019, the strategic dialogue that was held highlighted close cooperation on security development, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, and counterterrorism. The two governments also agreed to continue to cooperate closely to advance the shared vision of a free, open, and inclusive and peaceful and secure Indo-Pacific. Needless to say that the dialogue also has other avenues of exchanges, like a mill-to-mill dialogue that is held in Hawaii between our two militaries, and the similar kind of exchanges that take place in different platforms. One of the cornerstones of the growing relationship between our two countries, as the ambassador has also mentioned, is the Indo-Pacific strategy, as has been given by the United States and many of its allies around the world. Bangladesh does believe in the key principles of the Indo-Pacific strategy, as it shares the vision of an open and free and secure Indo-Pacific. But at the same time, as we seek more clarity of this developing concept and strategy, we'd also like to mention here that we would also like all our partners and friends to respect Bangladesh's position of strategic neutrality, because we have got friends all around the world, in the region and in other parts of the world, and we don't want any of our relationship to exclude others. So the position of strategic neutrality that Bangladesh possesses must be safeguarded in building our bilateral relationship. I see with satisfaction that there is a growing maritime security cooperation between our two countries, and the two navies continue to expand that cooperation also in the form of a number of bilateral exchanges and exercises. And as we speak here today, the 27th Cooperation Afloat Readiness Training, or CARAT, maritime exercise is taking place in Chittagong. The US has also helped us set up elite SWAT marine units in the Bangladesh Navy, which is modeled on the American and South Korean Special Forces. The US security assistance to Bangladesh has enhanced its maritime security, freedom of navigation, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief capabilities in support of the Indo-Pacific strategy. The US government has also allocated a fund of $130 million to active government-to-government sales in cases of Bangladesh under the Foreign Military Sales, or FMS system, which is a big help to our security sector development. I see that in 2012, Bangladesh was also able to acquire 4 C-130E transport aircraft worth $180 million from the United States. Since 2008, Bangladesh has also partnered with the state of Oregon via the National Guard State Partnership Program, where the state's National Guard in partners with the foreign military in order to establish a relationship that fosters cooperation and understanding. So, needless to say that it also goes beyond the national forces and goes to the state's capacity in building and fostering this kind of close security partnership with organizations in Bangladesh. Bangladesh has also received 20 aircraft engine provided with Title 10 security assistance during funding under the Excess Defense Article, or EDA program. Bangladesh also received 2 former US Coast Guard Hamilton-class cutters via the EDA in 2013 and 2015, which now serves proudly as some of the 2 largest vessels in the Bangladesh Navy. The cutters have significantly increased Bangladesh's capacity to provide maritime security through higher sustained transit speeds and greater endurance. As has also been mentioned by the ambassador, United States is also a partner with Bangladesh in our great effort in US peacekeeping. Bangladesh is a proud provider of the largest contribution of troops to the United Nations as it provides international peacekeeping support around the conflict zones in the world. Since 2005, the United States has contributed nearly $44 million in support of training, equipment, and to facilitate upgrades to enhance Bangladesh peacekeeping capabilities. Bangladesh has also received 50 EDA MRAP vehicles in 2019 to support its peacekeeping missions in Mali. Counterterrorism has been another cornerstone of our cooperation. As both countries fight the scourge of terrorism and international terrorism, we have built many mechanisms for cooperation. And I'm happy to say that most of these mechanisms are functioning extremely well. The US has also provided assistance in building our capacity and training for personnel who operate in counterterrorism operations. Another area of cooperation for our two countries has been disaster management and humanitarian assistance. The US has always assisted Bangladesh during cyclone and relief operation. I would like to say, especially with gratitude, that the relief operation after the cyclone in 1991, called Operation Sea Angels, is a milestone of that kind of a disaster relief support. And if the ambassador is hearing, as an ex-Marine officer, this is one of the best examples of US Marine operating in a foreign disaster area. And I also understand this operation has also been taught in the Marine Staff College as the best case example. The US engineers continue also to support in various civic actions in Bangladesh. They cooperate with Bangladesh Army's Engineering Corps in building schools in remote areas of the country, in repairing roads, or civic organization support. So therefore, our security and military cooperation and our strategic cooperation has been fairly comprehensive. And we continue to expand all areas where we can cooperate. Having said that with satisfaction, I would also now like to touch upon some areas where we can increase our cooperation, not only in the security sector, but beyond the security sector. And I will recommend some of these recommendations to the ambassador as he begins to leave and perhaps leave a note to his successor as he comes into the country. The first thing that comes to my mind is that the two countries must identify and start increased cooperation in terms of our non-traditional security challenges. Bangladesh, as you know, has a number of security challenges on the non-traditional area, and they need to be addressed on an urgent basis. And we need to increase our understanding and capacity in all those areas. So therefore, we should be partnering more effectively with the United States in building our capacity in meeting the non-traditional security challenges. One of the areas where we should also cooperate is on our energy security. Bangladesh is an energy-thirsty country as it continues on a fast-track development. Therefore, our energy needs are growing exponentially. But why we should cooperate more now is not development in fossil fuel energy. We need support of the United States in cooperating and developing a clean energy regime for Bangladesh. We need more cooperation in renewables and clean energy that we can together explore. We need to further understand and expand how exactly the two countries sees its role in cooperating and partnering in the Indo-Pacific strategy. Bangladesh has maintained, as I said at the beginning, that it will not be a part of any military agreement or pact that is being formulated anywhere in the world. It will also not be a part of any agreement or arrangement that acts to counter another country, because we are friends to all. Therefore, our position of strategic neutrality will be maintained at all times. I would recommend that there should be more promotion of integration and cooperation in the fields of science and technology, R&D, and especially developing on a very, very prosperous and prospectus IT sector in Bangladesh that the United States can support and also reap the benefits. US should also provide support to Bangladesh in terms of building capacity and other technical support in meeting the challenges of transnational security, such as human trafficking and drugs. In both fields, Bangladesh faces grave challenges. Bangladesh and US should cooperate very, very effectively and expand all avenues of meeting the challenges of climate change impacts on security. As has been very, very clearly identified, that Bangladesh faces one of the most existential threats from climate change, and therefore has a number of security challenges coming from climate security. I see with satisfaction that the United States has just done a recent assessment of their own security threats from climate security. So therefore, we together understand the grave needs, and we need to cooperate and build capacity in these fields. The United States has also provided assistance in building disaster resilience and building capacity for disaster management, an area where further inputs are needed as we face greater challenges of disaster in the climate-induced conditions. I would also like to say that the two countries should also cooperate in understanding and building capacity to meet the challenges of water security, in which Bangladesh has become extremely vulnerable. Cybersecurity is another area where we need to build capacity and we need to cooperate between the two countries. It's an area where Bangladesh still is extremely weak, and our cybersecurity and our cyber defenses need to be built up immediately and on an urgent basis. We have already been a victim of a cyber haste. We have lost money from our central bank through cyber hacking. So therefore, this is an area where there should be increased effort to build more cooperation. The ambassador did mention about youth cooperation. I would only like to emphasize and put emphasis that Bangladesh is a young country. More than 35% of our population fall under the youth category. So we need more engagements on youth-to-youth engagement between our countries. There has to be more cooperation and support in providing gender inclusivity in our systems. And that's an area where the US can cooperate. Strategically, Bangladesh is a key partner, not only on a regional scale, but in the scale of the Indo-Pacific strategy and internationally. I would like to point out that very often we find that Bangladesh is viewed through the lens of India. And that's an approach that I strongly recommend should be avoided. Bangladesh should be viewed on its own entity, on its own geostrategic importance, and its own position. Therefore, maritime cooperation is a key area for our partnership. Bangladesh is a key strategic maritime nation. We are a Bay of Bengal nation. We are an Indian Ocean nation. Bangladesh strategic location vis-a-vis the Bay of Bengal provides a unique position and strength to Bangladesh as a key strategic access provider to the Bay of Bengal on an access denied to the Bay of Bengal. These are strengths that must be fully explored and understood, and therefore we should bring our joint cooperation around areas of Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean area. I'm happy to let you know, Ambassador, that my think tank, Bangladesh Institute of Peace and Security Studies, or BIPS, was one of the first organizations in Bangladesh who initiated a maritime cooperation dialogue in 2014 between United States and Bangladesh, and our partner in Washington, D.C., the CNA Corporation, and us have been holding regular consultation on our maritime dialogue process. I would also like to suggest that Bangladesh should also be considered as a key net security provider to the Bay of Bengal maritime region. As the Bay of Bengal provides a key maritime space in the Indo-Pacific strategy, all these aspects must be taken into consideration in building our areas of cooperation. There should also now be a greater think tank to think tank cooperation and understanding. I'm also happy to say that for many years, BIPS has been cooperating with a number of think tanks in the United States, particularly based in Washington, D.C. And in the pre-COVID period, we've been holding yearly joint conferences in Washington, D.C. with the Atlantic Council, CSIS, the American Security Project, the National Defense University, IDA, Carnegie, and many other organizations and think tanks in Washington, D.C., and these are areas that need to be strengthened. I'm happy to say that the ambassador did provide an input into his understanding of Bangladesh's role in UN peacekeeping operation, and that's an area that needs further engagement and cooperation. Bangladesh needs a greater presence in US media if it wants to increase its profile and a clear understanding of our positions there. So therefore, a media engagement has to be effective between our two countries. I'd also like to finish up by saying that the US should play a leading role in lessening the tension in the Korean Peninsula, the states of Taiwan, the current Indo-Chinese border tension, as all of these have direct impact on security and stability of the Asian region, the South Asian region, that directly impacts Bangladesh. At the end, I would once again like to thank Ambassador Miller for his very kind remarks, especially as he sees Bangladesh and its people. Our relationships are enduring and they grow from strength to strength. We need to nurture them. And fundamental to everything, as the ambassador did mention in his remarks, is the growth, sustenance, and development of democracy in Bangladesh. I thank you all for your very patient hearing.
Thank you very much, Munir. That was very good. That was very also exhaustive. You've touched on many points, but you have brought to the fore particularly matters relating security, paid the appropriate focus on it, and also including maritime security, a very, very key and strategic key subject, because we have often spoken of security in terms of land security, but I can see that Bangladesh eventually would have to play a major role in the maritime sphere in the general area of meeting its security challenges. Also, Munir, for introducing the concept of strategic neutrality, as you called it, as a linchpin for discussions in our bilateral relations, not just for discussions, I assume, also for formulation of addressing it in our common policies. So thank you very much. Now, with these words, I will now give the floor to our final speaker. As always is owned, when Ambassador Tariq Karim speaks last, but he never speaks the least of all. So he's, of course, everybody knows about him, but recently he's become one of us at Cosmos, and I want to thank him for the tremendous support and encouragement he continually provides us on every such occasion. Ambassador Karim, your floor.
Thank you very much. I am in a sense relieved that much of what I had to say substantively, if I had to deliver a full statement, have been covered already. And with largely, I have no great quarrels with any of them. Particularly, I tend to agree with many of the points raised by Ambassador Farooq Subhan and also quite a few of the points raised by General Munir Zaman. Distinguished panelists and those present, good morning. I will confine myself to my reactions as they occurred in my mind as Ambassador Miller was speaking. And of course, I start with the statement, Ifti, I think you set the tone when you referred to the pull and push factors that matter so much in relationship between countries and powers, whether they are great or small. And here, I think, in a sense, I hope that you will convey the recorded video transcript of this to not just for the benefit of Ambassador Miller, who's outgoing, but for the benefit, more importantly, of his successor, Ambassador Peter Haas, who is very likely to come here, all things in the US system going smoothly, hopefully. In the pull and push factor that you mentioned, let us never forget the fact that the laws of nature are immutable and apply to the laws of men. Whether you apply pull or push, and whether it's by the big power on the small power, or the small power trying to induce the big power, there will always be an equal and opposite reaction. And so in framing one's policies and actions, every power, whether it's big or small, has to keep that in mind. People react. That's the very nature of Homo sapiens as a species. And whether Homo sapiens is the only dominant single species on this planet now, we may be divided into different ethnicities, races, cultures, national identities, but we tend generally to behave as Homo sapiens anywhere, at any time. So, important point to remember in policy formulation by any power, big or small. Number two, Ambassador Miller made a fine distinction. I accept that in foreign policy formulation, it's not just done by the establishment of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the State Department or something. There are various factors which come in. And he said through citizens, between friends, friend to friend, or enemies to enemies, conversely, and people to people. And when you take these three factors into how the foreign policy establishment of each, however it is configured, whatever manner it is configured in its relationship between the political machinery, the elected or non-elected machinery, and the people, it always, the thing to remember is whatever policies you embark on or decide to embark on, there are again the pull and push, the human reaction in other countries when they react to this. And so, yes, the administration of the US was hostile to us in 71. The people were very firm. And ultimately, the relationship that was established even during the Liberation War, but was between the people of Bangladesh and the people of the United States. I will come to a point raised by Ambassador Farooq Subhan. He asked it very candidly and straight way, and I think I like that way. When are the two leaders? When are we going to see a summit meeting at between the two presidents? This has been on the mind of many Bangladeshis here, that we talk so candidly about our excellent relationship. Why is that one factor missing? Because in ordinary people's perceptions, these visits matter. That is why you have sometimes a surfeit of visits from one or more countries, and conversely, you have a total deafening absence of exchange of visits between others. And people absorb that, they draw their own conclusions, which may be entirely wrong or off the course, but that translates into the politics. And eventually into the way policies are crafted. Ambassador Miller mentioned about the 5 big things, and I'm going to touch on 3 of those. Number 1, the Indo-Pacific and the global scenario. Bangladesh too has a perspective on it. As I mentioned earlier in other such gatherings, and particularly I mentioned that in the one in which Michael Kugelman featured, the first Indo-Bangladesh dialogue series. We were at the epicenter of an Indo-Pacific that pre-existed before the advent of colonialism, British colonialism, or even before any of the present powers today have thought about it. We were the connector between Western and Eastern civilizations. We were at the heart, at the apex of the Bay of Bengal. And that is why, in a sense, because we facilitated this connectivity between West and East, we also became one of the richest regions of the world globally. And we attracted the attention and notice of historians from the 4th century onwards until recently. Our phenomenon of having plummeted into the dregs of the poor and the downtrodden is only 7.5 decades ago. That's a very, very short, that's not even a blink of the eye in the progress of our civilizational history. So in a sense, we have no problems with the Indo-Pacific as a concept. We have problems if we are forced to take sides against anyone, against any other. And I think General Munir-uz-Zaman, when he said positive or strategic neutrality.
Strategic neutrality.
Yeah. Well, I have been advocating that for some time myself, that when Bangabandhu had talked about, in passing perhaps in 2 or 3 occasions, that Bangladesh will become the Switzerland of the East, I always wondered, did he have the actual Switzerland in mind, which was hemmed in by big powers all around it, but has been a neutral power or neutral state and maintained its neutrality for over 200 years. That was perhaps the secret for Switzerland's survival and not being absorbed by any of the big powers, and Switzerland becoming a major player in global relations today. And therefore, I have been saying to American friends and to others, we are with the Indo-Pacific, but not against the BRI or any other such grouping coming up, where economic and human development are the core areas defined. And we are conversely with the BRI, but not against the Indo-Pacific, because we are not taking sides with anyone against the other. So in a sense, maybe we are redefining or reimagining non-alignment, but I call it a positive non-alignment rather than an abstaining, completely hands-off non-alignment. Number 2, he made the point about democracy and good governance. I made this point earlier to Michael Kugelman. We are a fiercely proud nation. And I think our history and our reactions to major pressures on us in history have shown how we can stiffen our backs and take on powers far superior to us, if necessary, even at our own cost, but we will not bend to that. And therefore, when big powers or anyone external tries to twist arms or force us into a direction, they will probably come up with some sort of an opposing force, either seen or unseen. And I think everyone in such dealings should keep that in mind. Ultimately, citizen to citizen, people to people, human nature and human reactions on the ground level will translate into the politics and will reconfigure the shape of the politics if push comes to shove. He mentioned on the Rohingya refugees and the help, but it's not just the help, humanitarian assistance that we are seeking. we need to have the big powers put their action and money where the mouth is. The action and has to go where the source of the crisis began. It has to be on Myanmar. What sort of sanctions there will be? Sanctions do not work on Myanmar. And Myanmar right now is on the point of implosion with 4 or 5 different insurgent acts from different ethnicities fighting the state. With people on the streets, even though almost a year has passed after martial law was declared, and it's quite a well-trained and well-equipped army. So their inability to contain that civil unrest says something. If it implodes, there will be a follow-up explosion, and that explosion is going to affect the largest powers, however far away they may think they are from it. And therefore, I think that remark of helping on the Rohingyas has to be rethought with more strategic and more concrete elucidation of actions to be taken to address the source of the crisis. He mentioned about the large Chevron investments and the investments in the hydrocarbon industries and our efforts for oil and gas exploration. But I add my comments to the remarks, the suggestion by General Munir-uz-Zaman. I think the US needs more and more now to focus energy on how do we speed up transition to a green and clean energy paradigm and away from hydrocarbons. For us now, the biggest problem that faces us is climate change from global warming. And global warming predictions or recent facts that have come to light, they have already risen 1.25 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. This was supposed to happen a decade ago, or slightly around a decade ago. So we are not 5 minutes away from midnight, as was pronounced a few years ago. We are less than 2 minutes away from midnight. And so the faster we can do all sorts of things, every country has to try and bring. I mean, we can fall back on the argument that we produce the least carbon emissions. Why should we have to pay more? That doesn't matter. A fundamental lesson I learned when I was studying as well as teaching ecological security many years ago was, and in those days in the mid-2000s, it was the ozone layer which was obsessing us all, and we were figuring out how to reduce that. And the professor said to the class, look, Mr. Ozone up there doesn't care where the harmful emission is coming from. When he becomes angry, he hurts everyone. So in a sense, that argument that we produce so little, why should we pay so much, does not hold water here. Everyone, regardless of how much he is producing and emitting into the atmosphere, needs to collaborate and cooperate on it. The sooner we can bring down the collective of harmful gases in the atmosphere, which hurts the warming scenario, the better it is for everyone. Otherwise, the infuriated Mother Nature is going to wreak havoc on all her children, regardless of who is culpable and who is not. I would suggest, reinforce actually some of the suggestions made by General Munir-uz-Zaman. US should now focus, he mentioned about vaccines being made available. I would suggest focus on developing a capacity to manufacture vaccines here, transfer the technology, transfer the knowledge to enable us to make vaccines and produce vaccines. Because this we need for the entire world. We have presently, and it has been described by the Prime Minister herself, I have said so, it's a sort of vaccine colonialism. Somebody has described it as vaccine apartheid. We need to come out of that. Just as people fought against political apartheid and political colonialism, citizens will fight against this new form of apartheid or colonialism. We need help to develop to higher standards our higher education capacities. We need injection of money, not just words, in helping us to invest more in R&D. It's not just money. We need the brain power also and other ancillaries that come with it to actually help us go into the R&D section. Our own contribution to R&D is a very, very minuscule amount of our total GDP. It should be much higher. But we have other constraints. So that's where countries like the United States giving development assistance, part of that should be diverted into the R&D capacity building growth. Summit level meetings. Let me come to this point. It was a very, very pertinent point raised. Bangabandhu reached out to the United States in the very formative years. I know because I was on this side of the Ministry of Diplomacy at that time, how excited he was that we were admitted to the UN. Because one of the first questions he said is, am I going to be able to meet the US President? And he did meet the US President, but it was more of a photo op. It was not the substantive meeting that he wanted, and I don't think he got or came away with what he hoped he would get. And that shaped many of our subsequent policies and actions. It was 74. You remember the crisis, the manifold crisis through which Bangladesh was going at that time. So again, the circumstances forced leaderships to go from one to the other or whatever options are left. Because survival is the name of the game in this business of state formation and state consolidation. The point mentioned in passing, I think Farooq raised this point, US-India, the burgeoning strategic partnership emerging, and I mentioned this in the meeting with Michael Kugelman also. This will be seen in a certain framework here in Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is India locked. Whatever India does will evoke a reaction within the people of Bangladesh. We may or may not, they may or may not express it openly, but it will be there. And I think in a sense, Bangladesh will also judge US's policies or perspective of Bangladesh through the way they act or build the relationship with India also. I think India has been invited to this summit, so whatever spin we give on it, people will also factor that in. US policymakers would do well to take note of this. I mentioned at first that Bangladesh has proven to be very, very intractable to being pressurized into it. When International Development Agency tried to pressurize us on a major project that we were going, we said, okay, you can take a hike, we will do it on our own. And we are almost on the point of completing in a couple of years, we will see that, or less than a couple of years. So that is the way. I mean, when we withdraw, but we withdraw in a positive manner. We do not withdraw from the global community like the Myanmar does, which builds a fortress and just retreats into a shell. Non-traditional security challenges, yes, and perhaps General Muniruzzaman had more on his mind the non-state actors proliferation, particularly with two countries on our eastern and western flank now up in flames, which will have other effects. Yes, it will affect all sorts of non-state actors to start thinking of mimicry at the very least, if not worse. But I have more in mind non-traditional security challenges arising from the grievous damage that we have done to our ecosystem. And the ecosystem I'm thinking of is not just national ecosystem, but regional ecosystems, which is a part of the global ecosystem. And I think We need more cooperation with the bigger countries to help us face those challenges. The Bay of Bengal has been mentioned. For us, the Bay of Bengal is of existential comments for our own survival, not just as a nation state, for our own survival physically on this planet. I mentioned to a US diplomat just, I think, a couple of weeks ago that you are familiar with what havoc the cyclones and high tidal waves cause to us and have caused in the recent years. The intensity has been much more magnified and the devastating effects could be worse. But what saved us were the Sundarbans. What happens if the Sundarbans disappears tomorrow? He looked at me and said, the coastline of Bangladesh would change drastically. I said, okay, so imagine that scenario happening in 50 to 70 or 100 years. That's again a blink of an eyelid in a historical span. But if that happens, how many people will be displaced, deprived of their income, their livelihoods? Where will they go? They will not be Bangladesh's problems anymore. They will be global problems. They will also become your problems. So in that sense, we need to tailor our presentation and remarks to make powers who have the capacity to help us to actually sit up, take notice and said, okay, we have perhaps been looking at through a peripheral vision, if at all, in problems like this, which could become huge compared to what we are focusing on. And I'll end my remarks there. I hope US government will take it more seriously, some of the issues raised, and calibrate their own policies towards that end. Having said that, I think we are both democracies still in work. Every democracy is still is always work in progress. No one can give lectures to other democracies about how to do it because each nation has its own genius, its own way of doing it. So I think the focus should be more on helping those countries build up resilience, build up capacities in areas where they are lacking. When nations are confident, most of the other things come into play automatically. They will do so organically in a natural way. But if you try to force it, those countries have their own egos, their own self-respect, their own identities. They stand up and push back. It doesn't help the larger goals that you have in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tariq. It was extremely stimulating what you've said. In fact, we've had a very stimulating discussion today. I think, and of course, thank you for bringing up all the topics that you did. One of the remarkable feature of our discussions today was that it has been absolutely candid, straightforward, and definitive on the presentations made by the keynote speaker, as well as all the discussants. There are several things that have come to the fore. The need for a dialogue between our two countries at the highest possible level, which Farooq had said. I mean, we've had 20 years without it, and all the speakers have very appropriately, I think, emphasized that the need for symmetry. Now, from my perch in Singapore, the last 12 years, I've noticed the importance the store people and countries play by engagement. And engagement at the highest level, which is what symmetry is about, is encourage one another to cooperate. And that has been the thrust of the rest of our webinar, that countries like Bangladesh, which is the 8th largest country in the world in terms of population, as a matter of fact, an extremely pluralist country, and no one can deny that. Democracy is not something that you have some boxes, you can tick it off. As you have said, Tariq, just now, that everything is a democracy evolving. I mean, it has been evolving since Athens, to tell you the truth, and no one has reached the perfect status. So anyway, so we hope that this will occur. But of course, at the same time, we have identified all the elements that are common between our two peoples. This is really a people-led relationship, and we have underscored and emphasized that as well. Though the ambassador has not been present, of course, he'll be apprised of the contents of our discussion, and in the period between now and his departure, I'm sure some of these points raised or concerns raised by speakers at this deliberation will be responded to. In this meeting, I had actually a question from Masood Khan, who wanted to ask this question, which I think I will ask it on his behalf in order to put this on record, because he had noted the emphasis on cooperation on maritime issues, particularly development of the Bay of Bengal, and referred to the blue economy, and had wondered what the US can do to buttress cooperation in the area of tapping the blue economy, which I think is a very important point. I also want to recognize a very senior person who has sat through all our discussion today, Mr. Mujibur Rahman, who's former Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, now Chairman CMSF. Is that what it is, Mujib?
That's it, Capital Market Stabilization Fund.
Yes, in other words, sort of managing the burgeoning capital market in this country. Thank you very much for being with us and giving us your time, and I appreciate it very much, Najib, from the bottom of my heart.
So it has been a great forum, and I thank Cosmos Group for putting up this virtual platform. And as always, your steering has been phenomenal. Thank you, sir. And all the panelists have been making a very good point. So very quickly, sir, I would like to make 4 points. But firstly, let me thank the keynote speaker, Ambassador Miller, for being very eloquent. But definitely, there are points that I would like to make towards the end of my remarks on a different note. Firstly, sir, I personally feel that having spent years on the former Foreign Minister, Mr. Humayun Rashid Chaudhary, and diplomats like Ambassador Farooq Subhan, Ambassador Tariq Karim, and yourself, and spent years in New York. I'm confident, sir, that the relationship between our two countries are moving from strength to strength, and thanks to all your contributions. And so my first point is that I'm seeing some new areas of cooperation are emerging, something Ambassador Tariq Karim has alluded very clearly in the area of climate change, for example, and former presidential candidate and Secretary of State John Kerry's visit was considered very significant. So this is an area, sir, where we can cooperate more. So this is the first point. I think Ambassador Miller can definitely include it in his successor's note, and Ambassador Peter has, if appointed for Bangladesh, can definitely work on that. Secondly, sir, I'm again referring to Mr. Humayun Rashid Chaudhary. He used to say that the people in Capitol Hill have had different perspective about Bangladesh, because they are seeing Bangladesh either through or over the Atlantic Ocean. So one of his premier tasks has been to persuade them not to continue looking through the Atlantic Ocean, but see it through or over the Pacific. It looks like that it is now happening. The Indo-Pacific Forum is definitely an outcome of people's change perspective from within the Capitol Hill. My third short comment is, and this is addressing to Anayat, that whenever any serving ambassadors are coming for such dialogue, it will be sort of imperative for the organizers to arrange or ensure some presence from the Foreign Office, because there are issues which will be required to put in correct perspective. I used to do that in my different capacities while I was an active civil servant, but now that I'm a retiree and not in regular service, but as the chair said, I'm irregularly working around the capital market stabilization fund. We can do that, but it is important that the official representation is ensured so that they can put things into perspective. Some of Ambassador Miller's sort of comments, expression warranted that also, although Ambassador Tariq Karim has taken up many of the points. My fourth and final comment is about Ambassador Miller, who has been a good friend, because I was not only welcoming Ambassador Miller from within the PMO as in my capacity as principal secretary. I was very much there in the first meeting, but even we used to know about him before his arrival through one of my very distinguished colleagues, the late Military Secretary General Abedin. Both General Abedin and Ambassador Miller went to the same military schools, and they maintained their friendship. So he spoke very high of Ambassador Miller, and ever since Ambassador Miller's arrival, and I have been interacting with in all many platforms. He's what is called style is the person. So Ambassador Miller has been a very truly professional diplomat, interacting with all relevant people, always following the highest standard of the professional conduct, never running after what we used to say or used to see the many ambassadors are doing, running after the media hype. I am who has been seeing the US ambassador since mid-80s as Ambassador Shepard's officer in waiting in Sylhet as a protocol officer. Then I've seen at least 4 US lady ambassadors and many other ambassadors, but definitely Ambassador Miller stands tall, and he has set a very good standard and maybe a good benchmark for his successor to follow. So I wanted to congratulate Ambassador Miller for that particular achievement. But as Ambassador Tariq Karim mentioned, that we have different perspective on the different issues. 2018 election is a case in point. It was a very valid legal election. I was coordinating the law and order and a lot of other issues. I know the Foreign Office will definitely come up with its own version, but on the issue of governance and human rights, these are all the cherished goals in Bangladesh. Our constitution is enshrined on the values of good governance and human rights. Our father of the nation and all the formulators of the constitution did vindicate those points very well. And I think the current leadership is fully committed. So every time the ambassadors meet the leadership, especially the head of the government, Honorable Prime Minister, she makes it unequivocally clear that her government is fully committed to the highest standard of good governance and human rights. So thank you, sir. I think I might have taken extra time, but I definitely this session.
Thank you, Najib. Thank you for those remarks. These have been noted, all the points you have been noted, and let me assure you that no person in Bangladesh in service would have done better than you right now in sort of reacting at this point in time to the discussions here today. Of course, the contents of these discussions will be studied and thoroughly examined, and relevant people will react in different ways across a broad spectrum of government and non-government organizations in this country. So with this, Inayat, might I have the pleasure of giving the floor back to you, our host, and thank you for everything that you've done to get this going, and thank your team, her team, Catherine, and the whole Cosmos group for making this the success that it has been. Thank you, Inayat. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Iftibhai, for conducting and chairing this event so deftly. And it's without you, this whole event could not have been as interesting as it has been. Also, I think quite a number of new subjects have been discussed in this Ambassador Lecture Series. Especially Ambassador Miller has raised some very important points, like from human freedom to human rights to human security, media freedom, democracy, economic development, climate collaboration, security collaboration. I think hardly any topic has been not been discussed. I think everything has been, it's almost 360 degree, and especially Farooq Subhan Bhai's participation in our this Ambassador Lecture Series has added some more light, I would say. So Farooq Bhai, a very, very special thank to you, and welcome back to Dhaka. And we wish to see you more often in our future dialogues. We will be having thematic dialogues. We'll be starting with water security. We'll be doing an energy security versus decarbonization. So there are many topics that is relevant to Bangladesh, and we wish to take it up in the new year. So thank you also, Munir Bhai. You always add something that we all miss out. You cover the blind spots for us so deftly, and your presence is really very, very appreciated. And Tariq Karim Bhai, being the last batsman, he is always hitting at least a couple of sixes, and then the inning is over with a very happy note. And I'm so happy that today, especially also Najib Bhai, you made some very important comments, and I welcome. And we want to also want to see that you are more involved with us in our future, because it's a mission that we are trying to accomplish, and it's all about collaboration and team spirit. It's not that only Cosmos Foundation wants to do something. We are ready to collaborate. We would be collaborating with General Munir Zaman's very prominent think tank, and also we would like to collaborate, Farooq Bhai, with your BEI. We have been attending. You were one of the first that I started going and attending some of your events, and I think we can all collaborate, and for the betterment of our country, which we all love, whether we stay here or stay in Washington, we always think about our country. So with those comments, I would also like to thank Ambassador Miller. He had to leave for something very, very urgent, and anyways, I think he also touched on some very areas where I wish that he would, and I'm glad that he did. I also want to thank Nahar, Nabila, and Catherine for all the help, and their team. In fact, we are doing some books and brochures, celebrating 50 years of our relationship between some of the important countries, and USA is definitely one of them. And I would request Farooq Bhai and Munir Bhai and Tariq Bhai to help us to prepare this that book that will be also bringing out on Bangladesh-US relations, and we celebrate this. And I think all these publications would be a good asset for Bangladesh, and it will be laying the future foreign policy directives for our Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs personnel. So I would like to thank again, and I wish all of you a very happy new year, and hopefully, inshallah, in 2022 we will have many more events. I want to come back to Bangladesh soon. Inshallah, we will meet. Khuda Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.